The text message from my sister-in-law Melanie still burned on my phone screen. Eleanor says you're not coming to the family photoshoot on Sunday? Typical Morgan, always the family embarrassment. I guess some of us just don't prioritize family the way others do. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I stared at those words, my hands trembling slightly as I set my phone down on my office desk. 3 years of snide comments, backhanded compliments, and outright dismissal had culminated in this, being openly called the family embarrassment, just because I couldn't reschedule the biggest client presentation of my career. What Melanie didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't just an employee at Vertex Digital. I was the executive director of marketing operations, the person responsible for the company's meteoric growth over the past 2 years. The reason they never knew? They'd never bothered to ask. In their eyes, I was just Morgan, the awkward one who married Devon, the family disappointment who settled for a regular job instead of joining the prestigious family law practice. Little did Melanie know that in less than 24 hours, she would be sitting across from me in a job interview, having no idea who would be evaluating her application. I met Devon during my final year of business school. He was finishing his engineering degree, brilliant and kind, with eyes that crinkled at the corners when he laughed. We fell in love over late-night study sessions and early morning coffee. Runs. When he brought me home to meet his family 6 months later, I was nervous but excited. The Caldwell family was impressive on paper. Richard, the patriarch, ran a successful law firm. Eleanor, his wife, was a former state attorney who now managed the firm's operations. Their oldest son, Ethan, had followed directly in his father's footsteps, joining the family practice and marrying Melanie, a poised and polished socialite whose father was a state senator. Devon was the younger son, the one who had strayed from the family tradition by pursuing engineering instead of law. I still remember that first dinner at their lakefront home, the way Eleanor's eyes had swept over my simple dress and modest jewelry, the slight purse of Melanie's lips when I mentioned my marketing degree, the conversation that flowed around me but rarely included me. "So, Morgan," Richard had asked, swirling his expensive scotch, "what are your plans after graduation? Teaching? Perhaps?" "Actually, I've accepted a position at Vertex Digital," I'd replied, excitement creeping into my voice. "It's a growing tech marketing firm, and I'll be managing some of their emerging client accounts." A beat of silence followed, then Ethan chuckled. "Well, I suppose someone has to make the Facebook posts," he said, drawing laughter from everyone except Devon, who squeezed my hand under the table. That night set the tone for the next 3 years. Every family gathering was peppered with subtle digs about my career, my clothes, my background, solidly middle class compared to their affluence. When Devon and I got married in a simple ceremony, instead of the extravagant affair Eleanor had pushed for, the whispers intensified. When we bought our craftsman home in a family-friendly neighborhood instead of the upscale area where Ethan and Melanie lived, Melanie made sure to mention how quaint and cozy it was, words dripping with condescension. Then came our children. Zoe arrived first, a bright-eyed, curious little girl who preferred building blocks to princess dresses. Tyler followed 3 years later, sensitive and creative. They were the lights of our lives, but even they weren't spared the family's subtle hierarchy. At Christmas, Ethan and Melanie's children, Liam and Sophia, always received more elaborate gifts from Eleanor and Richard. At family gatherings, Melanie would orchestrate activities where her children were showcased, while mine were relegated to supporting roles. "Zoe, sweetie, why don't you help Sophia perform her ballet routine? You can turn the music on for her," Melanie had suggested at last year's 4th of July barbecue, despite the fact that Zoe had been practicing her own dance for weeks to show everyone. Devon noticed these things too, but years of family dynamics had conditioned him to minimize conflict. "They don't mean anything by it," he would say. "That's just how they are." But I saw the hurt in his eyes when his parents gushed over Ethan's latest courtroom victory while barely acknowledging Devon's promotion to senior engineering manager. Meanwhile, my career at Vertex Digital was flourishing in ways I never could have imagined. I had started as an account manager, but my innovative campaigns and ability to connect with clients quickly earned me promotions. By our second year of marriage, I was heading the marketing operations department. By the time Tyler was born, I had joined the executive leadership team. My salary now significantly outpaced Devon's, and likely Ethan's too, though we never discussed specifics. The irony wasn't lost on me that the career they so casually dismissed was now funding the comfortable life we had built, the college funds for our children, and our annual family vacations that never seemed to align with the Caldwell family events, much to Eleanor's chagrin. But I never corrected their assumptions. Part of me was waiting for them to simply ask about my work, to show even a flicker of genuine interest. They never did. In the Caldwell family narrative, I remained the underwhelming wife who did some vague marketing job that was hardly worth discussing. Until last Tuesday, I was in the middle of a strategy meeting with Marcus, our CEO, when my assistant slipped me a note. HR needs final approval on interview panel for the Director of Client Relations position. The Client Relations Director role was crucial. They would be the face of our company to our most important accounts, responsible for maintaining and growing our most valuable client relationships. We had narrowed it down to 3 candidates after an exhaustive search. The final interviews were scheduled for the next day. After the meeting, I stopped by Diana's office to review the candidate files one last time. As Director of HR, Diana had been instrumental in finding exceptional talent for our growing company. "I think we've got a strong final 3, Diana said, spreading the resumes across her desk. The John Group was particularly impressed with their presentations last week. I nodded, scanning the first 2 files, both strong candidates with impressive backgrounds. Then I reached for the 3rd file and froze. There, smiling professionally from her headshot, was Melanie. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Melanie Caldwell. I blinked, certain I was seeing things. But no, it was definitely her. The resume outlined her experience at her father's political consulting firm and her recent role at a boutique PR agency that had recently downsized. "Morgan, is everything okay?" Diana asked, noticing my expression. I managed a nod. "This candidate, Melanie Caldwell. She's actually my sister-in-law." Diana's eyes widened. "Oh, I had no idea. Her married name threw me off. Should we consider that a conflict of interest?" I took a deep breath, my mind racing. The professional thing would be to recuse myself from her interview process, to have Marcus or someone else evaluate her candidacy. But then my phone buzzed with a text. I glanced down to see Melanie's message. "Eleanor says you're not coming to the family photo shoot. On Sunday? Typical Morgan. Always the family embarrassment. I guess some of us just don't prioritize family the way others do." 3 years of dismissal and condescension crystallized in that moment. The family photo shoot had been scheduled with barely a week's notice, directly conflicting with my presentation to the John Group, a potential client worth millions to our company. When I had politely explained I couldn't attend due to work commitments, Eleanor had sighed heavily. "Well, I suppose we'll just have to explain your absence. Again." I looked back at Diana, decision made. No conflict of interest. I'll be professional. After all, she has no idea what I actually do here. That night, I barely slept. Devon was away at an engineering conference in Portland, so I had no one to confide in about this unexpected collision of my personal and professional worlds. I kept picturing Melanie's face when she realized who I was at Vertex, imagining her reaction when she discovered that the Facebook post manager she had dismissed for years was now evaluating her for a position she desperately needed after being laid off. Part of me felt guilty for not recusing myself. But a larger part, the part that had endured years of subtle and not-so-subtle belittlement, couldn't help but anticipate the moment of recognition. Not for revenge, but for something more fundamental, to finally be seen. Wednesday morning arrived with a crystal-clear Seattle sky, unusual for early spring. I dressed with particular care, selecting a tailored charcoal suit and the pearl earrings Devon had given me for our anniversary. If today was the day Melanie finally saw me, truly saw me, I wanted to look every inch the executive I was. The morning passed in a blur of meetings and calls. At 2:15, Diana messaged me. Final interview panel assembling in the glass conference room in 15 minutes. Candidate number 3, M. Caldwell, arriving now. I gathered my notes, took a deep breath, and headed toward the conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see Melanie already seated, her back to the door, chatting confidently with Marcus. She looked polished as always, her caramel-highlighted hair swept into a professional chignon, her navy blue dress likely costing more than my entire outfit. For a moment, I hesitated. I could walk away, make an excuse, let Marcus and Diana handle this. It would be easier, cleaner, less complicated. Then I remembered Zoe's face last Christmas when Sophia had been asked to play the piano for everyone, while Zoe's artwork remained unacknowledged in her little backpack. I remembered Devon's resigned shrug when his parents had forgotten our anniversary, but thrown an elaborate party for Ethan and Melanie's. I remembered 3 years of being treated as if my career was a cute hobby, not worthy of discussion or recognition. I squared my shoulders and pushed open the door. "Sorry I'm a bit late," I said, walking in with the confidence that had become my professional trademark. Traffic was unexpectedly heavy. Melanie turned, her practiced interview smile freezing on her face as recognition dawned. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly, the only crack in her poised demeanor. "Morgan," she said, recovering quickly. "What a surprise." Marcus looked between us, confused. "You two know each other." I smiled, extending my hand to Melanie as if we were meeting for the first time. "Melanie is married to my husband's brother. We're family." The emphasis I placed on the word family wasn't lost on Melanie, whose hand trembled slightly as she shook mine. "Well," Diana said brightly, perhaps sensing the tension, "isn't that a wonderful coincidence? Shall we begin?" What followed was the most surreal hour of my professional life. Melanie performed admirably, answering questions with polished expertise, outlining her experience with clients and her vision for the role. If she was rattled by my presence, she hid it well, almost. I noticed the slight flush on her neck when I asked particularly challenging questions, the way her gaze would skitter away when I referenced my role as executive director. I maintained absolute professionalism, evaluating her responses objectively, giving no indication of our complicated history. In fact, I went out of my way to make her feel comfortable, nodding encouragingly when she made strong points. As the interview concluded, Marcus turned to me. "Morgan, as this will be a direct report to your department, do you have any final questions for the candidate?" Melanie's eyes locked with mine, a silent plea in them that I couldn't quite interpret. Was she begging for mercy? For discretion? For me to suddenly play small, as I had been doing at family gatherings for years? I smiled. "Just one. Melanie, this role requires building authentic relationships with clients who often see through insincerity. In your experience, how have you handled relationships with people you initially underestimated or misunderstood?" The question hung in the air between us. It wasn't unprofessional. It was actually highly relevant to the position. But Melanie and I both knew it was about more than just client relations. To her credit, Melanie didn't falter. "I believe first impressions can be misleading," she said carefully. "I've learned that people often have depths and capabilities that aren't immediately apparent. The key is to approach every relationship with openness and a willingness to revise. Your initial assessments. Our eyes met, and for perhaps the first time, there was something like genuine recognition in her gaze. After she left, Marcus turned to me. Strong candidate. What do you think? I kept my assessment fair and balanced, highlighting both Melanie's strengths and the areas where the other candidates had outperformed her. Diana took notes, and by the end of our discussion, we had unanimously selected Janet Cho, a candidate with more direct experience in our industry, for the position. As I gathered my things to return to my office, Diana touched my arm. That must have been uncomfortable for you. You handled it with incredible grace. I shrugged. It's just business. But as I walked back to my office, my phone buzzed with a text from Melanie. Can we talk? Coffee after work? There's a Starbucks in your building lobby. I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to maintain the professional boundary that had just been established. But another part, perhaps, the part that had always hoped for genuine connection with Devon's family, made me type 5:30. The rest of the afternoon crawled by. I found myself unable to focus on my work, my mind replaying the interview, imagining the conversation to come. At 5:25, I packed up my laptop, checked my appearance in my office window reflection, and headed downstairs. Melanie was already there, seated at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. She had changed from her interview outfit into more casual clothes, still designer, but less formal. She looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than she had always seemed at family gatherings. I got you a latte, she said as I approached. Devon mentioned once it was your favorite. I was surprised she had remembered such a detail. Thanks, I said, sliding into the seat across from her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The ambient noise of the coffee shop filled the silence, espresso machines hissing, muted conversations, soft background music. Finally, Melanie spoke. I didn't get the job, did I? I met her gaze directly. The decision hasn't been made yet. A technically true statement, though we had reached a preliminary consensus. She nodded slowly. But if it were up to you? It's not just up to me, I replied. We have a panel for a reason. Morgan, she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Can we just be real with each other for once? I took a sip of my latte, considering her request. Okay, real it is. No, Melanie, you probably won't get this particular job. Not because of our personal history, but because Janet has more direct experience in our industry and with our specific client base. She absorbed this information with a small nod. I appreciate your honesty. She traced the rim of her cup with one manicured finger. I had no idea, about your position at Vertex. About any of it, really. You never asked, I said simply. Melanie winced. No, I didn't. She looked up at me, something like shame flickering across her features. When I saw you walk into that interview room today, I've never been so shocked in my life. Executive, director of marketing operations. I had to fight to keep my composure. You did well, I acknowledged. Very professional. Unlike how I've been with you all these years, she said quietly. I remained silent, neither confirming nor denying her statement. After years of diminishment, I wasn't going to make this easier for her. She started, then stopped, seeming to search for the right words. I've been insecure, jealous even. This surprised me. Of what? Of how easily you and Devon chose your own path, she admitted. Ethan and we've been playing roles our entire marriage. The perfect Caldwell couple, following Richard and Eleanor's blueprint exactly. The right house in the right neighborhood, the right schools, the right social connections. She shook her head. Do you know how exhausting that is? I thought. About our craftsman home, filled with mismatched furniture we loved. About Devon's workshop in the garage where he built birdhouses with the kids on weekends. About our family movie nights in pajamas with homemade popcorn. No, I said honestly, I don't. When you and Devon decided to just do your own thing, I resented it, Melanie continued. You seemed so unconcerned with the family expectations. So free. And Her voice caught slightly. I've been suffocating. I studied her face, seeing for the first time the strain beneath the perfect makeup, the tiredness in her eyes. Is that why you applied at Vertex? Looking for something of your own? She nodded. The consulting firm downsized, and suddenly I had a chance to do something different, something that wasn't connected to my father or the Caldwells. A humorless laugh escaped her. Ironic that I ended up applying to your company. Life has a strange sense of humor, I agreed. Melanie looked directly at me then, her composure cracking further. I'm sorry, Morgan, for the way I've treated you, for the family embarrassment text, for all of it. It was never about you. It was about me and my own issues. I'd waited 3 years for something like this acknowledgement, but now that it was happening, I felt no triumph, only a complicated mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and a surprising amount of empathy. I appreciate that, I said carefully. But Melanie, it wasn't just me. It's been Devon, too, and our children. She flinched. I know. I've been thinking about that all afternoon, seeing you in that conference room so confident, so respected. It made me reevaluate everything. She hesitated. Zoe's artwork is amazing, isn't it? She showed me her sketchbook last time you visited, but I didn't really look at it. I should have. That small acknowledgement of my daughter's talent, something the Caldwells had consistently overlooked, touched me unexpectedly. Yes, she's very creative. I've been so focused on maintaining this perfect image that I've missed what's real, Melanie said, a tear slipping down her cheek. She brushed it away quickly. Including the chance to actually know my niece and nephew, to know you. I took another sip of my latte, processing her words. Where does this leave us, then? Melanie straightened her shoulders slightly. That depends on you. I know one conversation doesn't erase years of behavior, but I'd like a chance to do better. To be better. She smiled weakly. Assuming we can move past the awkwardness of me accidentally interviewing with my sister-in-law, who I've been terrible to. Despite everything, I found myself smiling back. It will make an interesting story someday. For what it's worth, Melanie said. You were incredibly professional in there. I would have been a nervous wreck if our positions were reversed. Years of practice hiding my reactions at family gatherings, I replied, only half joking. She winced again. I deserved that. She hesitated, then added, the family photo shoot this Sunday. I understand completely why you can't make it. Your work is important. Yes, I said simply. It is. Melanie nodded. I'll make sure Eleanor understands that too. She gathered her purse, preparing to leave, then paused. This is presumptuous of me, but do you think there might be other positions opening up at Vertex? Not reporting to you, obviously, but I considered this. Despite everything, Melanie was qualified and capable. Her interview performance had proven that. We're expanding our public relations department next quarter. It would be a lateral move from your previous position, but with more growth potential. Hope flickered in her eyes. Would it be completely inappropriate for me to apply, given our connection? Not if we're transparent about it, I said. I could recuse myself from the hiring process. Thank you, she said quietly. Not just for that, but for being willing to even have this conversation with me after everything. As we stood to leave, Melanie hesitated, then asked, the family dinner next month for Richard and Eleanor's anniversary. Will you and Devon be there? I had already declined, citing work commitments that didn't actually exist. After years of uncomfortable family gatherings, I had started creating convenient excuses. We hadn't planned on it. Melanie bit her lip. Would you reconsider, I think? I think it's time for some things to change in this family, and I could use an ally. I studied her face, looking for any trace of the old manipulative Melanie. Instead, I saw only vulnerability and a genuine plea. I'll talk to Devon about it, I said finally. As we parted ways in front of the building, Melanie surprised me with a quick, awkward hug. Thank you, Morgan, for being far kinder today than I deserved. I watched her walk toward the parking garage, her shoulders not quite as perfectly squared as usual. For the first time since I'd met her, Melanie seemed human to me, flawed, insecure, struggling beneath her polished exterior. Driving home, to pick up the kids from their after-school program, I felt lighter somehow. Not because I'd experienced some moment of triumph or vindication, but because something authentic had finally broken through the artificial dynamic that had defined our relationship for years. That evening, as I helped Zoe with her science project and listened to Tyler's enthusiastic retelling of his day, I found myself thinking about family, not as an obligation or a source of tension, but as something that could perhaps be rebuilt, redefined on new and more honest terms. When Devon called from his conference that night, I told him everything. So, my perfect sister-in-law interviewed for a job with my supposedly career-challenged wife, who turns out to be an executive, he summarized, amusement evident in his voice. I wish I could have seen her face. It wasn't about humiliating her, Devon, I said, surprised to find I meant it. I know, he said, his voice softening. That's why I love you. So what happens now? I thought about Melanie's apology, her invitation to the anniversary dinner, her admission of her own struggles. I'm not sure, but I think something might be changing. Good, Devon said firmly. It's about time. After we hung up, I sat on our porch swing, watching the last light fade from the Seattle sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The John Group presentation, decisions about the client relations position, all the usual demands of my role at Vertex. But for the first time in years, the thought of the next Caldwell family gathering didn't fill me with dread. Instead, I felt something that might have been hope. Hope that the walls of pretense and judgment might finally be coming down, making space for something more genuine to grow in their place. The text from Melanie had called me the family embarrassment. But sitting there in the quiet of the evening, I realized I'd never again allow myself to be defined by someone else's perception. Not in my career, and not in my family relationships. Tomorrow I would walk into my presentation with the same confidence I'd shown in that interview room. And next month, perhaps, Devon and I would attend that anniversary dinner. Not as the family disappointments, but simply as ourselves. Authentic, accomplished, and finally ready to be truly seen. The next morning, I woke to the sound of rain pattering against our bedroom window. Devon was still away at his conference, and the house had that peculiar emptiness that comes when one person is missing from a family unit. I checked my phone and found 3 missed calls from Eleanor. Unusual, since my mother-in-law typically preferred to communicate through Devon, or more recently, through Melanie. I sighed, setting the phone aside to help the kids get ready for school. After dropping them off, I sat in my car in the school parking lot for a few extra minutes, gathering my thoughts before heading to the office. The John Group presentation was today, the very reason I'd declined the family photo shoot, and I needed to focus. But my conversation with Melanie kept replaying in my mind, along with Eleanor's unusual persistence in trying to reach me. Finally, I called her back. Morgan. Finally, Eleanor answered on the first ring, her voice tight with what sounded like restraint. I've been trying to reach you. I noticed. Is everything all right? A slight pause. Melanie came to see us last night. She was upset. My stomach tightened. Had Melanie told them about our encounter? About her job interview? I kept my voice neutral. Oh? She said the most extraordinary things? Eleanor continued, her tone suggesting she found the situation both confusing and slightly offensive. About how we've been treating you and the children. About your work. Is it true that you're some sort of executive? The dismissive edge to her question, some sort of executive, was so typical that I almost laughed. Even now, she couldn't bring herself to take my career seriously. I'm the executive director of marketing operations at Vertex Digital, I said calmly. I've been with the company for almost 6 years. Another pause, longer this time. I see. And Melanie interviewed there yesterday? Yes. With you? Among others. It's standard for our executive team to participate in final interviews for director-level positions. I could almost hear Eleanor processing this information, recalibrating, her understanding of our family dynamic. Well, she finally said, this is all rather unexpected. I made a non-committal sound, unwilling to make this easier for her. The family photo shoot on Sunday, she continued briskly, changing tactics. Perhaps we could reschedule it for the following weekend? If your work commitment is as important as Melanie suggests, we should accommodate that. It was the first time in 3 years that Eleanor had ever suggested rescheduling a family event to accommodate my schedule. The shift was so sudden, so transparent in its motivation, that I felt a flash of anger. I appreciate the thought, Eleanor, but my presentation to the Jiang group can't be moved. It's been scheduled for months. I'll have to miss this one. The Jiang group? She repeated, a new note of recognition in her voice. Richard has mentioned them. They're that large international conglomerate, aren't they? Yes, they are. I checked my watch. I'm sorry, but I really need to get to the office. We can talk more later. Of course, Eleanor said hurriedly. Good luck with your presentation, dear. I'm sure you'll do wonderfully. I hung up, staring at my phone in disbelief. Had Eleanor Caldwell just wished me luck on a work project? It seemed Melanie's revelation had shaken the family's perception more than I'd anticipated. At the office, I tried to push the Caldwell family drama from my mind. The John Group presentation was too important to be distracted. I spent the morning reviewing slides with my team, confirming data points, and ensuring our proposal was airtight. By the time the Zhang representatives arrived at noon, I was fully immersed in my professional persona, confident, articulate, and completely in command. The presentation went flawlessly. The Zhang executives asked challenging questions that my team handled with expertise, and by the end of the 3-hour meeting, we had secured a tentative agreement for what would be the largest contract in Vertex's history. As the Zhang team departed, Marcus clapped me on the shoulder, his face split with a wide grin. Spectacular work, Morgan. Absolutely spectacular. We'll finalize everything in the coming weeks, but I'd say we've got them. The victory was sweet, but as I returned to my office, I found myself thinking not of the professional triumph, but of the fact that my children's grandparents had never seen this side of me, had never cared to see it. The thought brought a heaviness that dampened my celebration. I was gathering my things to head home when Diana knocked on my door. Got a minute? Sure, come in. She closed the door behind her, which was unusual. I wanted to talk to you about the client relations position. We decided on Janet, right? Has something changed? Diana hesitated. Not exactly, but I've been thinking about your sister-in-law's application. Her qualifications are strong, and while Janet is the better fit for client relations, I think Melanie could be a good match for the PR manager role in Thompson's department. I leaned back in my chair considering this. The position hasn't been posted yet. No, but it will be next week. I know it's complicated, given your personal connection, but I wanted to run it by you before I suggested it to Thompson. The professional thing would be to encourage Diana to treat Melanie's application like any other. to evaluate her solely on her qualifications without my input. But after yesterday's conversation with Melanie, after seeing the genuine regret and vulnerability beneath her polished exterior, I found myself nodding. I think that's worth exploring. Melanie has strong PR experience, and the position wouldn't report to my department. As long as Thompson makes the final decision without influence, I don't see a conflict. Diana smiled. I thought you might say that. Pretty big of you, considering what you mentioned about your family dynamics. I shrugged. Professional and personal are separate things. Are they? Diana asked shrewdly. In my experience, they're more interconnected than we like to admit. She wasn't wrong. The lines between my professional and personal life had blurred significantly yesterday, and the ripple effects were still spreading. On the drive home, my phone rang again. Devon this time. I connected it to the car's Bluetooth. Hey, his warm voice filled the space. How did the presentation go? We got the contract, I said, a smile spreading across my face despite the complicated day. Tentatively, at least. They'll finalize in the next few weeks. That's my brilliant wife, Devon said proudly. I knew you would. His easy, unquestioning support had been my anchor through years of dismissal from his family. While they had diminished my career, Devon had celebrated every promotion, every success, with genuine pride. Thanks. How's the conference? Fine. But that's not why I called. Mom left me 3 voicemails today, all about you. I groaned. Let me guess. She's shocked to discover I'm not just playing with spreadsheets all day. Pretty much. She also mentioned something about Melanie being upset. What exactly happened after that interview yesterday? I recounted my coffee conversation with Melanie, trying to capture the unexpected vulnerability and apparent sincerity of her apology. Wow, Devon said when I finished. That doesn't sound like the Melanie I know. I thought the same thing. But there was something genuine about it, Dev. I think seeing me in that conference room, seeing the respect from Marcus and Diana, it shook her perception of me. Good, Devon said firmly. It's about time someone in my family saw you. Clearly. His loyalty warmed me. Speaking of family, your mother suggested rescheduling the photo shoot for next weekend. And? I told her no. The timing isn't the issue, Dev. It's the years of treating the kids and me like afterthoughts. One revelation about my job title doesn't erase that. Devon was quiet for a moment. You're right, it doesn't. Another pause. I'm sorry I haven't done more to stop it. You've been caught in the middle, I acknowledged. It's not easy standing up to your parents. Maybe it's time I did, though. The determination in his voice was new. I'm tired of watching them dismiss the most important people in my life. We talked for a while longer about the John contract and the kids' day, ending with our usual I love you before hanging up. As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked at the curb, a sleek black Audi that I recognized with a sinking feeling as Richard's. Sure enough, as I approached the front door, it swung open to reveal my father-in-law, dressed in his usual impeccable suit despite the casual setting. Morgan, he greeted me with an artificial warmth that immediately put me on edge. I hope you don't mind the surprise visit. I was in the neighborhood for a meeting and thought I'd stop by to see the grandchildren. In 3 years, Richard had never just stopped by to see Zoe and Tyler. Every interaction had been carefully scheduled, usually at their lakefront home or at larger family gatherings. The kids are at their after-school programs, I said, stepping past him into my own home. They won't be home for another hour. Ah, well, that gives us a chance to chat, doesn't it? Richard followed me inside, his eyes scanning our living room as if seeing it for the first time. Lovely home you have. Very comfortable. The pause before comfortable conveyed volumes. Our craftsman house, while spacious and well-maintained, wasn't in the same league as the Caldwell estate or Ethan and Melanie's mini mansion. Thank you. We like it. I set my briefcase down, not bothering to offer refreshments. What did you want to talk about, Richard? He settled himself on our couch, crossing one leg over the other. Eleanor mentioned you had a big presentation today. How did it go? The awkward attempt at showing interest in my career was so transparent that I almost laughed. It went well. Good, good. He nodded, as if he'd expected nothing less. The Jiang Group, was it? Quite a prestigious client. I waited, knowing there must be more to this visit than sudden interest in my work. Richard cleared his throat. Melanie came to see us last night. She was quite upset. So I heard. She seems to believe we, that is, Eleanor and I, have been less than supportive of you and Devon. And the children, of course. I raised an eyebrow. And what do you think? Richard shifted uncomfortably, unused to direct confrontation. Well, I think perhaps there have been some misunderstandings. Cultural differences, if you will. Cultural differences, I repeated flatly. The Caldwell family has certain traditions, certain expectations, Richard explained, as if talking to a child. We've always placed a high value on academic achievement, professional success. He gestured vaguely. Proper social connections. And you didn't think my career qualified as professional success. Richard had the grace to look slightly abashed. We may have underestimated the significance of your position. You never asked about it, Richard. Not once in 3 years. He frowned. Well, Devon mentioned you worked in marketing. You assumed it was trivial, just like you assumed Zoe's art wasn't worth acknowledging, or that Tyler's sensitivity was something to be corrected rather than appreciated. Richard's face reddened slightly. Now, that's not fair, Morgan. We love our grandchildren. Love isn't just a feeling, Richard. It's actions. It's showing up for dance recitals and admiring crayon drawings. It's treating them with the same enthusiasm and interest you show Liam and Sophia. My father-in-law looked genuinely startled by my directness. The Morgan he knew, or thought he knew, had always been accommodating, eager to please, willing to overlook slights for the sake of family harmony. He faltered, then regrouped. Perhaps we've been remiss in some ways. Old habits, you understand. But we'd like to make amends. I studied him, searching for sincerity beneath the practiced lawyer's demeanor. Why now, Richard? Because you found out I have a title you respect? Because I might be useful to your social network now? He flinched. That's rather harsh. Is it? Last Thanksgiving you spent 20 minutes discussing Ethan's latest case with him. You didn't ask Devon a single question about his work. Not one. Richard opened his mouth, then closed it again, seemingly at a loss for words. Finally, he sighed. I suppose I deserved that. The small admission surprised me. Richard Caldwell wasn't known for acknowledging his mistakes. Look, Morgan, he continued, his tone shifting to something more genuine. I'm not very good at this sort of thing. Emotional conversations. He gestured vaguely. But Melanie said some things last night that made Eleanor and me do some reflecting. About how we've treated you and Devon. About the message we've been sending to Zoe and Tyler. I remained silent, waiting. I won't pretend I fully understand your world, this tech marketing business. But I do understand dedication and ambition. And if this Jiang contract is what Melanie says it is, then you clearly have both in spades. It wasn't quite an apology, but coming from Richard, it was remarkably close. What exactly do you want, Richard? He straightened his already immaculate tie. We're hosting a dinner this Friday. Some important clients, a few colleagues. We'd like you and Devon to attend. And there it was, the real reason for his visit. Now that they knew of my position, the Caldwells wanted to showcase me, Perhaps mention my connection to the prestigious Jiang Group. As what? I asked coolly. Window dressing for your clients? Richard had the decency to look uncomfortable. As family, Morgan. As our son and daughter-in-law. I considered declining outright, but something made me pause. This wasn't just about me or Richard or even Devon. It was about creating a different dynamic for Zoe and Tyler, one where they weren't relegated to second-tier status in their own family. I'll discuss it with Devon when he returns, I said finally. But Richard, if we do come, things need to be different. Not just for one dinner, but going forward. He nodded slowly. I understand. As he rose to leave, Richard paused, looking around our living room again. His gaze landed on a framed drawing of Zoe's, an imaginative underwater scene with mermaids and sea creatures that she'd created last year. Did Zoe draw this? He asked, genuinely curious. Yes, last summer. He stepped closer, examining it with newfound interest. She's quite talented, isn't she? Those colors. Very sophisticated for her age. It was such a small thing, a grandfather noticing his granddaughter's artwork. But the simple acknowledgement brought an unexpected lump to my throat. She takes after Devon, I said. He loved to draw as a child. Richard's expression softened. Yes, he did. I have a drawing of his framed in my office, actually. A rocket ship he designed when he was about 9. He smiled slightly. I always thought he'd be an astronaut. This glimpse of the father who had once treasured Devon's creativity, before expectations of law school and the family firm had taken over, was both heartening and sad. What might their relationship have been if Richard had continued to nurture Devon's natural inclinations, rather than trying to force him into a predetermined mold? After Richard left, I sat alone in the quiet house, trying to process the rapid shifts in the Caldwell family dynamic. In the space of 24 hours, my sister-in-law had apologized, my mother-in-law had acknowledged my career, and my father-in-law had shown interest in Zoe's artwork. It was as if a long-frozen lake had suddenly begun to thaw, unevenly, unpredictably, but undeniably. When I picked up the children from their programs, I found myself studying them with new eyes, wondering how they perceived the subtle hierarchies within the extended family, whether they had internalized the message that their cousins somehow mattered more. Mom, look what I made! Tyler bounded toward me, clutching a clay sculpture. It's a dragon. I knelt to admire it, noting the careful attention to detail in the scales and wings. It's amazing, Ty. We should show Grandpa Richard next time we see him. Tyler's expression fell slightly. He won't care. He likes Liam's sports trophies better. The simple statement, delivered with the matter-of-fact acceptance of a 5-year-old, broke my heart. They had noticed. Of course they had noticed. You know what? I think Grandpa might surprise you, I said, hoping it might someday be true. Later that evening, after the kids were in bed, I received a text from Melanie that caught me completely off guard. Diana from your HR dep called me today about a PR manager position. Did you have something to do with that? I considered my response carefully. I didn't want her to think I was doing her a favor out of pity, but I also didn't want to lie. Diana makes her own decisions about candidates, but she did mention she thought you might be a good fit for the role. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared again. Finally. Thank you. I have an interview next week. This means a lot to me, Morgan. I wasn't quite ready for effusive gratitude from Melanie, so I kept my response simple. Good luck with the interview. A moment later, another text arrived. I meant what I said yesterday. About doing better, being better, starting with how I talk about you to the family. I'm sorry it took something like this for me to see clearly. I stared at the screen, trying to reconcile this vulnerable, reflective Melanie with the poised, judgmental woman who had dismissed me for years. People didn't change overnight. I knew that. And yet, the shock of our encounter in that conference room seemed to have catalyzed something genuine in her. "One day at a time," I texted back. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was an opening, a willingness to see where this newfound awareness might lead. Devon called again before bed, and I filled him in on Richard's surprise visit and the dinner invitation. "Friday?" Devon sounded skeptical. "That's just 2 days after I get back. Seems awfully convenient timing." "He wants to show us off now that he knows I'm not just playing with Facebook posts," I agreed. "But I'm thinking maybe we should go." "Really? After everything?" I sighed, trying to articulate the complicated feelings I'd been processing all day. "It's not about forgiving and forgetting, Dev. It's about establishing a new normal. If they're finally willing to see me, to see us, clearly, don't we owe it to the kids to try?" Devon was quiet for a moment. "Did something specific happen with the kids?" I told him about Tyler's comment regarding his clay dragon. The casual acceptance that his grandfather wouldn't be interested in his art the way he was in Liam's sports achievements. "Damn it!" Devon's voice was tight with emotion. "I didn't realize they were picking up on it so clearly." "Kids always do. They're more perceptive than we give them credit for." Another silence, then Devon sighed. "Okay, we'll go to the dinner. But Morgan, I'm done with the passive approach. If my parents or Ethan say anything, dismissive about you or the kids, I'm calling it out right there." "That sounds fair," I agreed, relieved that we were aligned. "Oh, and one more thing. Melanie has an interview for a PR manager position at Vertex next week." Devon laughed in disbelief. "Seriously? Is the universe playing some cosmic joke on us?" "Beginning to think so. But Devon, I actually think this could be good for her. She said something yesterday about suffocating under your parents' expectations, about being jealous that we chose our own path." "Melanie? Jealous of us?" Devon sounded incredulous. "With their house and their country club membership and their perfect Caldwell life?" "Appearances can be deceiving," I reminded him. "Maybe there's more going on beneath the surface than we realized." That night, I lay awake long after we'd hung up, my mind racing with the day's events. The Jiang contract, Richard's visit, Melanie's texts, it all swirled together in a confusing mix of professional triumph and personal upheaval. For years, I had compartmentalized my life, keeping my professional success separate from the family that seemed determined not to acknowledge it. Now those walls were crumbling, forcing an integration I hadn't anticipated. The question wasn't just whether the Caldwells could change their perception of me, but whether I was ready to let them see the real me, successful, confident, unapologetic about my choices, after years of playing small to maintain an uneasy peace. As I finally drifted toward sleep, I found myself thinking of Zoe and Tyler, how they watched and learned from every interaction, every family dynamic. If nothing else, I owed it to them to model what it looked like to stand in your truth, to demand respect rather than acceptance, to show them that family love shouldn't require diminishing yourself to fit someone else's narrow expectations. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, perhaps new conflicts as the Caldwell family recalibrated around this shifted understanding of who I was. But for the first time in years, I felt ready to meet those challenges not as Devon's accommodating wife, but as Morgan, executive director, mother, and woman who no longer needed anyone's permission to take up space in her own life. The following morning brought unexpected news. I was reviewing quarterly projections when Olivia, my assistant, appeared at my door with an unusually concerned expression. "Morgan, there's a woman here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's rather insistent." I glanced at my packed calendar with a frown. "Who is it?" "She says she's your sister-in-law, Melanie Caldwell." I set down my pen, surprised. After our coffee shop conversation and text exchange, I hadn't expected to see Melanie again until perhaps the family dinner on Friday. "Send her in, please." Melanie appeared a moment later, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup, a stark departure from her customary polished appearance. "Morgan, I'm sorry to barge in like this," she said, her voice tight with what sounded like barely contained emotion. "I wouldn't have come if it wasn't important." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What's going on?" Melanie sat, her movements stiff. "It's Ethan. He found out about my interview here, about our conversation. And? He's furious. Says I betrayed the family by airing our dirty laundry to you." Her laugh was hollow, as if you weren't part of the family yourself. I leaned back, processing this. "How did he find out?" "Richard told him about his visit to your house. Ethan put two and two together, confronted me about it last night." She twisted her wedding ring anxiously. "It got ugly, Morgan. Really? Ugly?" The distress in her voice seemed genuine. "I'm sorry to hear that. But, Melanie, what exactly do you want from me?" She met my eyes directly. "Advice? Maybe support." "I've never seen Ethan like this. He threatened to tell your HR department that I'm emotionally unstable, unsuitable for the position." "He can't do that," I said immediately. "HR decisions aren't made based on unsubstantiated claims from family members." "I know, but—" Melanie hesitated. "There's more. He's talking about calling Marcus directly, trying to leverage Richard's connections to interfere." A flash of anger surged through me. "That's completely inappropriate." "I know. That's why I'm here." Melanie's voice cracked slightly. "Morgan, I realize we're not close, that I've been difficult over the years, but I really want this chance. Need it, actually." I studied her, seeing again the strain beneath the surface. "Why is this job so important to you, Melanie? Beyond the obvious financial reasons?" She was quiet for a long moment, then spoke softly. "Because it would be mine. Not something I got through Ethan or Richard or my father, something I earned on my own merits." The simple admission resonated with me more than I'd expected. Despite our differences, I understood the deep human desire to be recognized for one's own abilities, separate from family connections or expectations. "Look," I said finally, "I can't guarantee you'll get the position. Thompson will make that decision based on qualifications alone. But I can promise that Ethan's threats won't influence the process. Vertex doesn't operate that way." Relief washed over Melanie's face. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. If you get this job, it will be because you earned it. And Melanie?" I leaned forward. "Working here won't be easy. You'll be judged solely on your performance. No special treatment, no family considerations." Far from being intimidated, Melanie straightened, a spark of determination in her eyes. "That's exactly what I want." Our conversation was interrupted by Olivia appearing at the door again. "Sorry, Morgan, but your 11 o'clock is here. The Mackenzie team?" I nodded. "I'll be right there." As Melanie rose to leave, she hesitated. "One more thing. Ethan is talking about not coming to the dinner on Friday if you and Devon attend." I raised an eyebrow. And I told him he was being childish." A small, defiant smile played at her lips. Another first in our marriage. The comment surprised a laugh out of me. "Look at you, standing up to the Caldwell men. Learning from your example, I suppose." Melanie's expression turned serious again. "Thank you, Morgan, for hearing me out, for not throwing me out of your office, which you would have had every right to do." As I watched her leave, I found myself once again recalibrating my understanding of Melanie Caldwell, the polished, perfect sister-in-law who had seemed so untouchable, so secure in her position within the family hierarchy, was apparently fighting her own battles against the same expectations that had marginalized Devon and me. The thought stayed with me through my meeting with the Mackenzie team. through lunch, through an afternoon of calls and strategy sessions. By the time I headed home, I had made a decision. Whatever happened at Friday's dinner, whatever new family drama unfolded, I would approach it not as Devon's wife or the children's mother, but as myself, Morgan Taylor, executive director and woman who no longer needed the Caldwell family's approval to know her own worth. Friday arrived faster than I'd anticipated. Devon had returned from his conference the previous evening, and we'd spent hours discussing the dramatic shifts in his family's behavior. He alternated between skepticism about their sudden interest in my career and cautious optimism that perhaps finally things might change for the better. "I just don't want you getting your hopes up," I told him as we got dressed for the dinner. 3 years of patterns don't change overnight. Devon adjusted his tie, his expression thoughtful. "I know. But Mom actually called and asked what Zoe's favorite dessert is. She's never done that before." I paused in the middle of applying my lipstick. "What did you tell her?" "That Zoe loves strawberry cheesecake, and that Tyler is obsessed with those little chocolate lava cakes." A smile tugged at his lips. "She wrote it down, Morgan." I could hear her making notes. I tried to temper the hope in his voice with realism. "It's a start. But Devon, this dinner tonight, it's not just about family reconciliation. Your father wants to show me off to his colleagues now that he knows I have connections to the John Group." Devon's smile faded. "Yeah, I figured as much. Classic Richard Caldwell, always working an angle." He crossed the room to wrap his arms around my waist, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "But we're not going for him. We're going for us. For the kids. To set new boundaries and expectations." I leaned back against his solid warmth, drawing strength from his presence. Agreed. No more diminishing ourselves to keep the peace. Devon kissed my temple. "I've never been prouder of you than when you told me about facing Melanie in that interview room. Standing in your power without apology. It's who you've always been. In your career. It's time my family sees that version of you too." We'd arranged for Jessica, my colleague and friend, to watch Zoe and Tyler for the evening. When we arrived at Eleanor and Richard's lakefront home, I was struck by how little it had changed over the years. The same imposing facade, the same meticulously landscaped grounds, the same air of unattainable perfection. Eleanor opened the door herself instead of having the housekeeper do it. Another departure from the usual protocol. "Devon, Morgan," she greeted us with unusual warmth. "We're so glad you could make it." Devon gave his mother a quick hug while I offered a polite smile. Eleanor led us through to the back terrace where drinks were being served, chattering about the guest list with uncharacteristic nervousness. Richard's invited the Wilsons. John's a senior partner at Drummond and Hayes, and the Bakers from the Symphony Board. Oh, and Judge Harrington and his wife are here. I think you'll find the conversation quite stimulating, Morgan." The careful emphasis on the judge's title and the prestigious connections wasn't lost on me. Eleanor was trying to impress me, to show that the Caldwell social circle was worthy of my newly discovered executive status. The irony was almost painful. The terrace was filled with about 20 guests, most in their 50s and 60s, dressed in the understated luxury that characterized Richard's professional circle. Richard himself stood near the stone railing, deep in conversation with an older man I recognized as Judge Harrington from newspaper photos. When he spotted us, he excused himself and came over, clapping Devon on the shoulder with unusual enthusiasm. "There you are. Judge Harrington was just asking about you." Richard turned to me with a smile that seemed almost genuine. "And Morgan, you look lovely tonight. I was telling John Wilson about your work with the John Group. He's very impressed." Devon and I exchanged a glance, his expression clearly saying, "Told you so." I kept my own smile pleasant but reserved. "The John contract is a team effort, Richard. I'm just one part of a larger strategy." "Don't be modest," Richard countered, guiding us toward a cluster of guests. Morgan here is executive director at Vertex Digital, he announced proudly, as if he'd personally mentored my career. They've just secured a major international client, very prestigious work. For the next 30 minutes, I found myself in the bizarre position of being Richard Caldwell's prized exhibit, introduced to everyone with glowing descriptions of my professional achievements, many of which he'd only learned about 2 days ago. Devon stayed close, his hand a reassuring presence at the small of my back, his expression a mix of amusement and irritation at his father's transparent behavior. It was during a conversation with John Wilson and his wife that I first noticed Ethan's absence. I scanned the crowd but saw no sign of him or Melanie. "They're not coming," Eleanor murmured, suddenly appearing at my elbow with a fresh glass of wine. "Ethan called this afternoon to say they had other commitments." The careful neutrality in her voice suggested there was more to the story. I thought of Melanie's visit to my office, her mention of Ethan's fury at her betrayal. Other commitments? Or is Ethan refusing to attend because Devon and I are here? I asked quietly. Eleanor's perfectly composed face flickered with surprise at my directness. Well, there may have been some discussion about that. And you allowed it? After specifically inviting us? Eleanor sipped her wine, avoiding my gaze. Ethan has always been sensitive about family matters. You mean he's always gotten his way, I corrected gently. To my surprise, Eleanor didn't deny it. Instead, she sighed, a small crack appearing in her usually impenetrable facade. You have to understand, Morgan. After Devon chose engineering over law, Ethan became Richard's focus, his legacy at the firm. Perhaps we've been overly accommodating as a result. It was the closest thing to an admission of favoritism I'd ever heard from Eleanor. Before I could respond, a staff member appeared to announce dinner was served, and Eleanor moved away to direct guests toward the dining room. Devon rejoined me, his expression concerned. "Everything okay? You looked like you were having an intense conversation with Mom." "Ethan and Melanie aren't coming," I explained as we followed the crowd indoors. Apparently, Ethan refused to attend because of us. Devon's jaw tightened. Typical. He always was the golden child who could do no wrong. Even his tantrums were indulged. The dining room was elegant as always, the long table set with Eleanor's finest china and crystal. Place cards guided guests to their seats, and I was surprised to find myself positioned near the head of the table, directly across from Judge Harrington and adjacent to Richard himself. Devon was several seats away, between John Wilson's wife and a woman I didn't recognize. It was a calculated move, separating us to maximize Richard's ability to showcase me to his important connections. Devon caught my eye across the table, raising an eyebrow in silent question. I gave him a small nod to indicate I was fine with the arrangement. This was, after all, exactly what we'd expected. The first course was being served when my phone vibrated in my clutch. I ignored it initially, not wanting to be rude, but when it buzzed again immediately, I discreetly checked the screen under the table. 2 texts from Melanie. "Are you at the dinner?" Followed by, "Please call when you can. It's important." I frowned, slipping the phone back into my purse. Whatever was happening with Melanie would have to wait. I returned my attention to the conversation around me, where Richard was skillfully guiding the discussion toward the expanding Asian markets, a clear setup to highlight my work with the John Group. "Morgan, you must have fascinating insights on this," Richard prompted with practiced smoothness. "Your company's recent agreement with the John Group puts you at the forefront of these market shifts." And so it continued through the soup and into the main course, Richard orchestrating opportunities for me to demonstrate my expertise, nodding proudly as if he'd been supporting my career all along. It was surreal and slightly disorienting, like watching an alternate version of the past 3 years play out, one where my professional accomplishments had been valued rather than dismissed. By the time dessert was served, strawberry cheesecake, and chocolate lava cakes, I noted with surprise. My phone had buzzed 3 more times. When Eleanor excused herself briefly from the table, I took the opportunity to step away as well, retreating to the powder room to check my messages. 5 texts from Melanie, increasing in urgency. Need to talk. Are you at the dinner? Ethan left hours ago, not answering his phone. I'm worried. We had a huge fight about my interview. Please call when you get this. I hesitated, torn between returning to the carefully orchestrated dinner and responding to what seemed like genuine distress. With a sigh, I called Melanie's number. She answered on the first ring. Morgan, are you at my in-laws? Yes, at the dinner. What's going on, Melanie? Her voice was tight with tension. Has Ethan shown up there? No. Eleanor said you both had other commitments. A sharp intake of breath. We had a massive fight this afternoon, about the job interview, about me talking to you. He stormed out hours ago, and his phone's going straight to voicemail. I've called everyone I can think of. Despite our complicated history, the fear in Melanie's voice seemed genuine. Have you checked his office? The country club? Everywhere. Morgan, he's never disappeared like this before, and he was so angry when he left. A soft knock at the powder room door interrupted us. Morgan, Eleanor's voice called. Are you all right, dear? Dessert is being served? I'll be right out, I called back, then lowered my voice. Melanie, I need to get back to the dinner. Have you tried? Richard's assistant? Maybe she knows where he might go when he's upset. No, but that's a good idea. Melanie paused. I'm sorry to bother you with this tonight. I didn't know who else to call. The admission that she'd turned to me, of all people, in a moment of crisis, wasn't lost on me. It's fine. Text me if you find him, okay? I will. Thanks, Morgan. I ended the call and rejoined the dinner party, sliding back into my seat with an apologetic smile. Richard was in the middle of describing Devon's recent engineering award to Judge Harrington, another surprising departure from his usual pattern of focusing exclusively on Ethan's accomplishments. The innovation in his hydraulic system design is quite remarkable, Richard was saying. Always knew he had a brilliant mind, even as a child. Devon looked as startled as I felt at this unexpected praise. His eyes met mine across the table, a question in them that I couldn't answer with Richard's associates watching. I gave a slight shrug and reached for my water glass. Before I could take a sip, the dining room doors burst open with a bang. Ethan. Caldwell stood in the doorway, his usually impeccable appearance in disarray. Tie loosened, hair disheveled, face flushed with what looked like a combination of anger and alcohol. Well, isn't this cozy? He slurred, swaying slightly as he surveyed the suddenly silent table. The family dinner I wasn't invited to. Eleanor rose immediately, her face pale. Ethan, what are you doing? You said you couldn't come tonight. No, Mother. I said I wouldn't come if they were here. He jabbed a finger toward Devon and me. But then I thought, why should I miss out? Why should I be the one excluded for once? Richard stood now too, his expression thunderous. Ethan, you're drunk. This is completely inappropriate. We have guests. Oh yes, your precious guests. Ethan's laugh was bitter as he staggered into the room. By all means, let's maintain appearances. That's what matters most, right, Dad? Devon started to rise, but I caught his eye with a small shake of my head. This situation was volatile enough without adding more fuel to the fire. Morgan. Ethan's attention swung to me, his eyes narrowing. The woman of the hour. Executive. Director. So important. So accomplished. Each word dripped with sarcasm. Did you all know she's been manipulating my wife? Turning Melanie against me? Against this family? The stunned silence around the table was excruciating. I kept my expression neutral, refusing to give Ethan the reaction he clearly wanted. Ethan, that's enough, Richard said, his voice low and dangerous. You're making a scene. A scene? You want to talk about scenes? Ethan lurched forward, gripping the back of an empty chair for support. How about the scene where you suddenly start parading Morgan around like she's the family success story? After years of treating her like she was nothing? After years of treating Devon like the family disappointment? Devon stood now, ignoring my earlier warning. Ethan, you're drunk. Let's take this somewhere private. Oh, now you want privacy? When it's finally your turn in the spotlight? Ethan's face contorted with years of unspoken resentment. Always the peacemaker, aren't you, Devon? Never rocking the boat. Well, guess what? I'm tired of pretending everything's fine just to make you feel better. Eleanor had moved to Ethan's side, trying to guide him toward the door. Please, darling, you're not yourself. Let's get you home to Melanie. At the mention of his wife, Ethan's expression darkened further. Melanie, my perfect, loyal wife, who's now applying for jobs behind my back. Taking career advice from Morgan. He spat my name like it tasted bitter. The family embarrassment is suddenly the family role model. And there it was. The phrase from Melanie's text that had started this entire cascade. The family embarrassment. I felt Devon's eyes on me, saw the comprehension dawning on his face as he made the connection. That's what you've been calling. Morgan? Devon's voice was dangerously quiet. The family embarrassment? Ethan smirked, despite Eleanor's attempts to hustle him out of the room. Ask Melanie. She's the one who said it first. Morgan's always been the family embarrassment. Her exact words. I thought of the text I'd received just days ago. Melanie's casual cruelty born of years of unchallenged superiority within the family hierarchy. The text that had been on my phone screen when I learned she'd applied to Vertex. Devon's face had hardened into something I rarely saw. Pure, cold anger. And you wonder why we've kept our distance from this family. Why we've created our own traditions, our own celebrations. Devon, Richard interjected, clearly trying to salvage the situation in front of his colleagues. Ethan's not himself tonight. He doesn't mean— Stop, Dad. Devon's voice cut through the room like steel. Stop making excuses for him. Stop pretending this isn't exactly the dynamic you and Mom have fostered for years. The silence that followed was deafening. Around the table, Richard's colleagues and their wives sat frozen, witnessing the implosion of the carefully cultivated Caldwell family image. Eleanor's face had lost all color, her eyes darting between her sons with undisguised panic. I stood, slowly, gathering my purse. I think it's time for us to go. Morgan, please, Eleanor began, but I cut her off with a gentle headshake. This isn't the time or place for this conversation, I said quietly. Your guests deserve better than to be caught in family drama. Richard looked torn between gratitude for my attempt to salvage some dignity from the situation and dismay that Devon and I were leaving. Before he could speak, Ethan laughed again, the hollow sound of someone whose carefully constructed world was crumbling. Yes, run away, like you always do. Hide in your little craftsman house with your perfect children and your important job. Pretend you're better than all of us. Devon moved toward his brother then, not with anger, but with a kind of weary compassion. You need help, Ethan. Go home to Melanie. She's worried about you. Melanie, Ethan repeated, his voice suddenly small. She's probably packing her bags as we speak, leaving me just like everything else is. There was such naked fear in his voice that I felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. Beneath the anger and alcohol was a man terrified of losing the foundations of his identity, his position as the favorite son, his marriage to the perfect wife, his unquestioned superiority within the family structure. She's not leaving you, I said, softening my tone. She called me earlier looking for you. She's worried, Ethan. She just wants you home. Something in my words seemed to reach him. His shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him as quickly as it had erupted. "She called you? Looking for me?" I nodded. "Go home, Ethan. Talk to your wife." With that, Devon and I made our exit, leaving Richard and Eleanor to manage the aftermath. Neither of us spoke until we reached the car, the cool night air a relief after the suffocating tension inside. "Well," Devon said as he slid into the driver's seat, "that wasn't exactly how I imagined this dinner ending." I leaned back against the headrest, suddenly exhausted. "Did you know about them calling me the family embarrassment?" Devon's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "No, God, no, Morgan. If I'd known—" He shook his head. "I'm so sorry. I should have done more, said more, over the years." "It's not your fault," I said, reaching over to touch his arm. "You've always supported me, always had my back. You can't control how your family sees me. They're supposed to be your family too." His voice was heavy with regret. What a mess. Poor Melanie, though. I never thought I'd say those words, but she looked genuinely scared on the phone. I nodded, thinking of the vulnerability in Melanie's voice when she'd called. So different from the poised, controlled woman I'd known for years. I think there's a lot going on beneath the surface there. Ethan's clearly struggling with the shifting dynamics. Devon started the car, backing out of his parents' circular driveway. It was bound to happen eventually. The perfect Caldwell. Image has always been a facade. It just took you shaking things up to finally crack it open. Me? I don't think I— "Morgan," Devon interrupted gently, "you've always been the catalyst. Your success, your confidence, your refusal to diminish yourself to make others comfortable. It challenges the whole system they've built. That's why they've kept you at arm's length. You're the variable they couldn't control." His words settled over me as we drove through the quiet Seattle streets toward home. Had I really been a catalyst? I'd always seen myself as an outsider, tolerated but never truly accepted into the Caldwell fold. But perhaps Devon was right. Perhaps my very existence as a successful woman who didn't fit their narrow definitions had been threatening the carefully constructed family mythology all along. When we arrived home, Jessica reported that the kids had been perfect angels, already tucked into bed hours ago. After she left, Devon and I sat at the kitchen table, processing the evening's dramatic turn. "I should check on Melanie," I said, pulling out my phone. "Let her know Ethan's on his way home, hopefully." I sent a quick text. "Ethan showed up at the dinner. We suggested he go home to you. Is everything okay?" The response came almost immediately. "He just walked in. Thank you, Morgan. I owe you one." Devon was watching me with a thoughtful expression. "You know what's strange? A week ago I couldn't have imagined you texting Melanie about anything, let alone trying to help her with a personal crisis. A week ago, she was still the perfect Caldwell daughter-in-law, and I was still the family embarrassment," I replied with a wry smile. Amazing how quickly things can change. "Do you think it's real, this change in her?" I considered the question, thinking of Melanie's visit to my office, the vulnerability in her voice tonight. I think it's complicated. People don't transform overnight. But seeing me in that conference room, in my professional element, I think it forced her to confront some assumptions she'd been making. And maybe some dissatisfactions in her own life, too. Devon nodded slowly. "And my parents? All that sudden interest in your career? In the kids' preferences? Equally complicated." I sighed. "Part of it is certainly opportunistic, Richard, seeing a way to leverage my John connection for his own professional network. But at dinner, the way he was talking about your engineering award, that seemed genuine." "It did, didn't it?" A small smile played at Devon's lips. First time in 20 years he's acknowledged my career without adding, "Of course, law would have been more suitable." My phone buzzed with another text, from Melanie. "Ethan's asleep now. Things are still tense, but he's home safe. Thank you for how you handled things tonight. He told me what happened at dinner. I showed the message to Devon, who raised an eyebrow. The new, grateful Melanie is going to take some getting used to. I typed back a simple, glad he's home safe, and set my phone down. We should check on the kids. Together, we tiptoed. Upstairs, peering first into Tyler's room where he was sprawled across his bed, one arm wrapped around his favorite stuffed dragon. In Zoe's room, we found her sleeping peacefully, her sketchbook fallen open beside her pillow. She must have been drawing right until she fell asleep. Standing in the doorway of our daughter's room, Devon slipped his arm around my waist. We did good, didn't we? Despite all the Caldwell drama. I leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. We did. They're amazing kids. Because they have an amazing mother who's never once made them feel like they need to be something they're not. Devon kissed the top of my head. I want to thank you for tonight. For standing your ground all these years. For showing me what it looks like to value yourself even when others don't. His words brought unexpected tears to my eyes. We've done it together, Devon. Created our own family culture outside the Caldwell shadow. As we returned downstairs, my phone rang. Eleanor's number flashing on the screen. Devon and I exchanged a glance. You don't have to answer that, he said. I hesitated, then picked up the phone. Hello, Eleanor. Morgan. Her voice sounded strained, exhausted. We wanted to apologize for what happened tonight. Ethan was completely out of line. Yes, he was. A beat of silence then. The things he said. About you being the family embarrassment. I want you to know that Richard and I have never thought of you that way. I closed my eyes, gathering patience. Eleanor, you may not have used those words, but your actions have often told the same story. The way you've treated my career, my children, my choices, they've all sent a clear message about where I stand in the family hierarchy. Another silence, longer this time. I suppose we deserve that, she finally said, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. I won't make excuses, but I want you to know that we're truly sorry, not just for tonight, but for the past 3 years. Part of me wanted to accept the apology at face value, to believe that tonight's disaster had genuinely awakened Eleanor to the damage done by years of subtle exclusion and dismissal. But another part, the part that had protected me through years of professional challenges and personal slights, remained cautious. I appreciate that, Eleanor. But an apology is just the beginning. Real change takes time and consistent effort. I understand, she said quietly. Will you at least give us the chance to try? For the children's sake, if nothing else? I looked at Devon, who had been listening to my side of the conversation with a thoughtful expression. He gave a small nod, not urging me one way or the other, but indicating his support for whatever decision I made. We can try, I said finally. But it needs to be different this time. Real engagement with Zoe and Tyler. Real respect for Devon's career choices and mine. No more hints that we're somehow less valuable members of this family. Yes, of course, Eleanor agreed quickly, perhaps too quickly. We'll do better, Morgan, I promise. After we hung up, Devon raised an eyebrow. You think she means it? I set the phone down with a sigh. I think she wants to mean it. Whether she can actually change patterns that have been in place for decades. That remains to be seen. Devon nodded thoughtfully. And us? Where do we go from here? I considered the question, thinking of Ethan's drunken outburst, Melanie's unexpected vulnerability, Richard and Eleanor's attempts at reconciliation, all catalyzed by the simple fact of my professional identity finally being recognized. We keep standing in our truth, I said finally. We maintain our boundaries. And we give them the opportunity to meet us where we are, not where they want us to be. Later that night, As Devon slept beside me, I found myself wide awake, replaying the events of the past week. My mind kept returning to that moment in the interview room when Melanie had first seen me, really seen me, in my element. The shock in her eyes, the recalibration of everything she thought she knew about me. In that moment, something fundamental had shifted, not just for Melanie or the Caldwells, but for me as well. After years of compartmentalizing my life, of accepting diminishment in family spaces while thriving professionally, I had finally integrated these separate worlds. I no longer needed to make myself smaller to accommodate the Caldwell family mythology. I could simply be who I was, executive director, mother, wife, without apology or explanation. Whether they chose to accept that version of me was their decision, not my responsibility. With that thought, I finally drifted towards sleep, feeling oddly liberated. Whatever came next with the Caldwells, reconciliation or further conflict, I would face it as my whole, authentic self. The family embarrassment had become the family catalyst, and there was no going back from here. The weekend passed quietly after Friday night's dramatic dinner. Devon and I deliberately kept our schedule focused on the kids, taking them to the park, helping Zoe with her art project, building a model rocket with Tyler that Devon had brought back from his conference. Neither of us mentioned the Caldwell family drama in front of the children, though we debriefed in hushed voices after they went to bed each night. I'd expected a flurry of calls and texts from Eleanor or Richard, perhaps even Ethan once he'd sobered up, but there was only one message all weekend, a brief text from Melanie on Sunday afternoon. Ethan and I are going to try counseling. His idea, surprisingly. Thank you again for Friday night. By Monday morning, returning to work felt like stepping into a different world, one where family dynamics and personal relationships took a backseat to quarterly projections and marketing strategies. I welcomed the shift in focus, throwing myself into preparations for finalizing the John contract with an intensity that even Olivia noticed. "You're even more laser-focused than usual," she commented, dropping off a stack of reports on my desk. "Everything okay?" "Just a busy weekend," I replied vaguely. "Has Diana made a decision about the PR manager position yet?" Olivia raised an eyebrow at my transparent attempt to change the subject, but played along. "Thompson's conducting final interviews today. I hear your sister-in-law is still in the running." News traveled fast at Vertex. I kept my expression neutral. "Good to know. She's well qualified." "And it's not awkward at all that she'd be working in the same company as you?" Olivia's tone was light but curious. I considered the question more seriously than Olivia probably expected. A week ago, the thought of Melanie working at Vertex would have been unimaginable, two separate worlds colliding in potentially disastrous ways. But after Friday night's implosion at the Caldwell dinner, after seeing Ethan's insecurities laid bare and Melanie's unexpected vulnerability, the prospect seemed less threatening. "It might have been awkward once," I admitted. "But things are evolving on that front." Before Olivia could press for details, Marcus appeared in my doorway, looking unusually serious. "Morgan, got a minute? In my office?" I followed him down the hallway, mentally reviewing any potential issues that might require the CEO's direct attention. When we entered his office, I was surprised to find Diana already there, her expression equally solemn. "Close the door, please," Marcus said, gesturing for me to take a seat. "We have a situation I wanted to discuss with you directly." A flicker of concern moved through me. "What's going on?" Marcus and Diana exchanged a glance before he continued. "I received a call this morning from Richard Caldwell." My stomach dropped. "My father-in-law." "Yes," he mentioned the connection. Marcus's expression was carefully neutral. "He was inquiring about employment opportunities for his daughter-in-law, Melanie Caldwell. Specifically, he wanted to know if there was anything he could do to facilitate her candidacy for the PR manager position." I closed my eyes briefly, mortification washing over me. After everything, The dramatic confrontation at dinner, Eleanor's apology, the supposed new leaf they were turning over. Richard was still pulling strings, still operating according to the old Caldwell playbook. Marcus, I had no idea he would do this. I'm so sorry. Marcus waved away my apology. I know that, Morgan. That's not why I called you in here. I wanted to let you know how I handled it, given the delicate family dynamics involved. Diana leaned forward. We felt it was important to be transparent with you, especially since you've already disclosed your relationship to the candidate. I appreciate that, I said, still processing the implications of Richard's interference. What did you tell him? I explained our hiring policies very clearly, Marcus said, a hint of steel beneath his professional tone. That all candidates are evaluated solely on their qualifications and interview performance, and that any attempt to influence the process through personal connections would actually disadvantage the candidate in question. I winced, imagining how that conversation must have gone. Richard Caldwell was not a man accustomed to being rebuffed. He seemed surprised by my position, Marcus continued, a wry smile touching his lips. Apparently in his legal circles, these sorts of professional courtesies are common practice. I'm sure they are, I murmured, thinking of the many ways the Caldwell influence had opened doors throughout Ethan's career, doors that Devon had deliberately chosen not to walk through. The thing is, Diana interjected, Thompson completed his final interviews this morning, before Richard's call, and he selected Melanie for the position, based solely on her qualifications and performance. I blinked, absorbing this information. So Richard's call was not only inappropriate, but completely unnecessary. Exactly, Marcus nodded. And now we have a decision to make. Given this attempted outside influence, should we reconsider Thompson's selection? Or do we proceed as planned, knowing that the selection was made before any interference occurred? I understood immediately why they had called me in. As an executive who had personally disclosed a conflict of interest with this candidate, my input would carry significant weight. May I ask who made the final decision on hiring? I asked carefully. Thompson, with Diana's oversight, Marcus replied. You were deliberately excluded from the process, as we agreed. I nodded, thinking through the implications. And both of you feel confident that Melanie was selected based solely on her merits? Absolutely, Diana confirmed. Her experience in political PR is particularly valuable for the projects Thompson has planned. She was the strongest candidate, hands down. I took a deep breath, weighing my personal knowledge of the Caldwell family dynamics against my professional responsibilities to Vertex. Then I think we should proceed with the hire. Penalizing Melanie for Richard's inappropriate behavior would be unfair, especially when she likely has no idea he made that call. Marcus studied me for a moment. You're sure about this? It won't create complications for you personally? The question was asked with genuine concern rather than professional calculation. In the 6 years I'd worked with Marcus, he had always respected the boundaries between work and personal life. Complications are already there, I said honestly. But they're not Vertex's problem to solve. Melanie deserves to be judged on her own merits, not her connection to me or Richard's attempts at influence. Marcus nodded, seeming satisfied with my response. Good. That's what I was thinking as, well, Diana will proceed with the offer today. As I returned to my office, I debated whether to call Devon immediately or wait until I got home to discuss this latest development. Before I could decide, my phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Morgan, would it be possible for us to have lunch this week? Just the two of us? There are some things I'd like to discuss. I stared at the message, surprised by the direct outreach. In 3 years, Eleanor had never once invited me to a one-on-one lunch. Our interactions had always been part of larger family gatherings, with Devon or the children as buffers. After a moment's consideration, I replied, Thursday works for Me? 1 p.m.? If Richard was still pulling strings behind the scenes, I wanted to know exactly where things stood with the Caldwell family. Eleanor's response came quickly. Perfect. There's a lovely bistro near your office, Le Petit Jardin. Would that work? The fact that she knew a restaurant near my office, that she had actually considered my convenience, was another, small but notable shift. That works. See you Thursday. I had just set my phone down when Olivia buzzed my office. Thompson online too for you. I picked up, expecting a question about the John contract or one of our other ongoing projects. Morgan Taylor. Morgan, glad I caught you. Thompson's typically exuberant voice came through the line. I wanted to let you know personally that we've selected Melanie Caldwell for the PR manager position. Diana mentioned she's your sister-in-law. She is, I confirmed. I appreciate you letting me know directly. I also wanted to assure you that her relationship to you played no role in the decision. She was genuinely the strongest candidate. Her political PR background is exactly what we need for the advocacy campaigns we're planning next quarter. I trust your judgment completely, Thompson. I meant it. Despite his occasionally overwhelming energy, Thompson was one of our most astute department heads. When will she start? We're looking at 2 weeks from now. I'll be coordinating with HR on the details. After hanging up, I sat back in my chair, considering the implications of Melanie joining Vertex. Despite the progress in our personal relationship, having her in the office would inevitably blur the lines between professional and personal in ways I hadn't anticipated a week ago. Would she respect the boundaries between our work and family, relationships? Would Ethan's apparent insecurities create complications? And most importantly, was Richard's call to Marcus an isolated incident, or a sign that the Caldwells hadn't changed as much as they wanted us to believe? Thursday arrived, before I had answers to any of these questions. The intervening days had been filled with finalizing the John contract details and preparing for a board presentation, leaving little time to dwell on family matters. I hadn't even told Melanie about Richard's call to Marcus, partly because I wanted to see if she would mention it herself, and partly because I wasn't sure it was my place to disclose that information. Le Petit Jardin was busy when I arrived at precisely 1 p.m., the lunchtime crowd a mix of professionals from nearby offices and well-heeled older women enjoying leisurely meals. Eleanor was already there, seated at a corner table partly secluded by a decorative trellis covered in artificial ivy, private enough for a potentially difficult conversation. She stood as I approached, offering a quick, slightly awkward embrace. Morgan, thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would after Friday night. I settled into the chair across from her, noting that Eleanor looked less polished than usual, still elegant in her cashmere sweater and pearls, but with a tiredness around her eyes that makeup couldn't quite conceal. I thought it might be good for us to talk directly, I said, keeping my tone neutral. A server appeared to take our drink orders, sparkling water for me, white wine for Eleanor. When he departed, Eleanor folded her hands on the table, her wedding and engagement rings catching the light. I want to apologize again for Friday night, she began. Ethan's behavior was inexcusable. It was, I agreed. But I think it was also revealing. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Revealing? About the dynamics in your family. About the pressures and expectations that have been building for years. I paused as the server returned with our drinks and took our lunch orders. When he left again, I continued. Ethan's outburst didn't happen in a vacuum, Eleanor. She sipped her wine, a flash of discomfort crossing her features. No, I suppose it didn't. After a moment, she added, he and Melanie are seeing a counselor. Did you know that? Melanie mentioned they were going to try. Eleanor nodded, seeming to gather her thoughts. Richard and I have been doing some reflecting since Friday about the way we've handled things with both our sons, with you and Melanie. with the grandchildren. I remained silent, giving her space to continue. We haven't been fair to you, Morgan. Eleanor's voice held an unusual note of vulnerability. Or to Devon. Or to Zoe and Tyler. We've played favorites, emphasized certain achievements over others, created a hierarchy that wasn't right. The frank admission surprised me. I had expected deflection, perhaps some superficial acknowledgement of mistakes, but not this direct confrontation of their behavior. Why now? I asked quietly. Is it just because you found out about my position at Vertex? Because suddenly my career has value in your eyes? Eleanor flinched slightly. I deserved that. And yes, learning about your executive role was a wake-up call. It forced us to recognize how little attention we've paid to your work, your accomplishments. She hesitated. But it's more than that. Seeing Ethan like that, so angry, so afraid of losing his position as the golden child, it made us realize what we've created, what we've incentivized in our family. Our food arrived, a Niçoise salad for me, coq au vin for Eleanor. We both used the interruption to gather our thoughts, thanking the server and arranging our napkins before continuing the conversation. Ethan told us about Melanie's job offer at Vertex, Eleanor said once we were alone again. Congratulations. To her, it sounds like a wonderful opportunity. I took a bite of my salad, considering how to respond. It is. She was selected based on her qualifications, which are substantial. Of course. Eleanor cut a small piece of chicken, her movements precise. Richard thought he might help things along a bit. I told him it was inappropriate, but you know how he can be. And there it was, the acknowledgement I had been waiting for. Not a question about whether Richard had called Marcus, but a tacit admission that he had. Marcus mentioned Richard's call, I said calmly. It wasn't necessary. Melanie had already been selected for the position on her own merits. Eleanor set down her fork, genuine dismay crossing her features. Oh dear, I was afraid of that. Richard was so certain he was helping. That's been part of the problem all along, hasn't it? I observed, keeping my tone gentle despite the seriousness of the conversation. The assumption that your help is needed, wanted, beneficial, without actually asking what would truly be helpful. Eleanor's gaze dropped to her plate. I never thought of it that way. We've always seen it as taking care of the family, making sure everyone has what they need. But on your terms, I pointed out, according to your definition of success and happiness, not necessarily ours. A long moment of silence followed, Eleanor seemingly absorbing this perspective. Finally, she looked up, her expression more vulnerable than I had ever seen it. I don't think I know how to be different, she admitted, quietly. This pattern, it's how Richard and I have always operated, how we were raised ourselves. The simple honesty of her statement touched me unexpectedly. For the first time, I could see Eleanor not just as my difficult mother-in-law, but as a woman shaped by her own upbringing and experiences, perpetuating patterns she perhaps didn't fully understand herself. Change is possible, I said, softening my approach. But it takes conscious effort and genuine desire. It means asking questions instead of making assumptions, listening instead of directing. Eleanor nodded slowly. Like asking what Zoe and Tyler's favorite desserts are instead of assuming they'd want what Liam and Sophia prefer. Exactly. Or asking Devon about his engineering projects with real interest, not as a courtesy. Or asking about your work at Vertex, Eleanor added, meeting my gaze directly. Which I'd like to do now, if that's all right. Not because of the Jong contract or any connections it might offer, but because it's clearly important to you. Because it's part of who you are. The request, simple as it was, felt significant. Perhaps the first time Eleanor had expressed genuine interest in my career without an ulterior motive. And so, over the remainder of our lunch, I told her about my role at Vertex, about the challenges and satisfactions of leading the marketing operations department, about the team I'd built and the projects I was proud of. Eleanor asked thoughtful questions, listened attentively, and never once made a dismissive comment or compared my work to Ethan's legal career. It was, perhaps, the most authentic conversation we'd ever had. As we finished our dessert, a shared chocolate souffle that Eleanor insisted we try, she broached another subject I hadn't expected. "Morgan, there's something else I wanted to discuss with you. Something more personal." I set down my espresso, curious. "What is it?" Eleanor seemed to choose her words carefully. "Richard and I have been thinking a lot about our relationship with Zoe and Tyler, about how we've fallen short as grandparents. We'd like to change that, if you and Devon would allow it." "What did you have in mind?" "We'd like to spend more time with them, individually, not just at family gatherings. To really get to know them as the unique little people they are." She hesitated. "Perhaps we could take Zoe to the art museum she's always talking about. And Tyler to the science center. Separate outings where they could have our full attention." The suggestion was so perfectly aligned with the children's interests, so different from the Caldwell's usual approach of group activities where Liam and Sophia inevitably took center stage, that it momentarily left me speechless. That would be wonderful, Eleanor. I know they'd love that." Relief softened her features. "Good. That's good. We want to do better, Morgan. We want to be the grandparents they deserve." As we prepared to leave, settling the bill, which Eleanor insisted on paying, she placed a hand lightly on my arm. "There's one more thing. Richard mentioned that the Jong contract will be finalized next week. We'd like to host a celebration dinner, not for our friends or colleagues, but just for family, to celebrate your achievement properly." I thought of previous Caldwell celebrations, formal affairs designed more to impress guests than to genuinely honor the occasion. "Just family?" Eleanor nodded. "Just us. You, Devon, the children, Ethan and Melanie, if they feel up to it after everything that's happened. A real family dinner to recognize your hard work." I found myself wanting to believe in this new version of Eleanor, this grandmother who wanted to take Zoe to an art museum, this mother-in-law who listened with genuine interest to details about my work. "I'll talk to Devon about it," I promised. "But it sounds lovely." As we parted outside the restaurant, Eleanor surprised me with another embrace, less awkward this time, more sincere. "Thank you for giving us another chance, Morgan. I know we don't deserve it after how we've treated you all these years." "Everyone deserves a chance to change, Eleanor," I said, finding that I genuinely meant it. Driving back to the office, I reflected on the unexpected lunch. Eleanor's apparent sincerity had caught me off guard. I had expected polite deflection, perhaps some surface-level apologies, not this seemingly genuine desire for transformation. Was it possible that Friday night's dramatic confrontation had truly catalyzed meaningful change in the Caldwell family dynamics? I was still pondering this question when I arrived back at Vertex to find Diana waiting in my office, her expression troubled. "Everything okay?" I asked, setting down my bag. "We have a situation with the PR manager position," she said without preamble. "Melanie Caldwell just called to decline our offer." I blinked in surprise. Decline? But she was so excited about the opportunity. Diana nodded, sharing my confusion. That's what made her call so strange. She was clearly upset, said something about it not being the right time, and needing to focus on her family right now. A cold suspicion formed in my mind. Did she mention anything else? Anyone else? No, but she sounded... Diana searched for the right word. Constrained, like someone who's choosing their words very carefully. I pulled out my phone, finding no messages from Melanie. After Eleanor's lunch conversation, after the apparent progress in Ethan and Melanie's relationship, this sudden reversal made no sense, unless someone had intervened. Thanks for letting me know, Diana. I'll see if I can find out what happened. After Diana left, I sent a text to Melanie. Diana just told me you declined the PR position. Is everything okay? Minutes passed with no response. Finally, I decided on a more direct approach and called her number. It went straight to voicemail. By the time I left the office that evening, I still hadn't heard from Melanie. The contrast between Eleanor's seemingly heartfelt lunch conversation and Melanie's mysterious withdrawal from the job offer created a dissonance I couldn't reconcile. Had Ethan pressured her to decline? Had Richard or Eleanor, despite their apparent change of heart? Devon was already home when I arrived, helping Zoe with her homework at the kitchen table while Tyler colored beside them. The simple domestic scene. My family engaged in their evening routine, safe and content in our home, brought a rush of gratitude that momentarily pushed aside my concerns about the Caldwells. Hey, you. Devon greeted me with a smile. How was your lunch with Mom? Surprisingly good, actually. We can talk about it after the kids go to bed. I dropped a kiss on his head, then on Zoe's and Tyler's. What are we working on here? Fractions, Zoe declared with a dramatic sigh. They're the worst. They're not so bad once you get the hang of them, I assured her, setting down my bag and joining them at the table. The evening unfolded with its usual rhythm. Homework, dinner, bath time for the kids, story time, then finally quiet as Devon and I settled on the couch with glasses of wine. I recounted my lunch with Eleanor, her seemingly genuine apologies, and desire to change, her specific suggestions about spending individual time with Zoe and Tyler. Devon listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. Wow, that sounds promising. More specific and thoughtful than I would have expected from Mom. That's what I thought too. But then something strange happened. I told him about Melanie's unexpected withdrawal from the job offer, her lack of response to my outreach. Devon frowned. That doesn't make sense. She was so excited about the opportunity, about having something that was hers alone. Exactly. It feels like someone might have pressured her to decline. Ethan, Devon suggested immediately. He was pretty unhinged. At dinner on Friday. Maybe he's still threatened by your influence on Melanie. I considered this, recalling Melanie's text about them seeking counseling. Maybe, but they seem to be working through things. And your mom mentioned they were seeing a counselor, which could be making Ethan even more defensive, Devon pointed out. Therapy has a way of bringing issues to the surface before they get better. Before I could respond, my phone rang, Melanie's number flashing on the screen. I exchanged a glance with Devon before answering. Melanie, is everything okay? No. Her voice was hushed, as if she were trying not to be overheard. But I can't really talk right now. Can we meet tomorrow? Coffee before work? Of course, the Starbucks. In my building lobby at 7:30? Perfect. And Morgan, come alone, please. The call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at the phone in confusion. Devon raised an eyebrow in silent question. She wants to meet for coffee tomorrow morning. Alone. She sounds stressed. Devon sighed, running a hand through his hair. I was really hoping things were improving after the counseling news. This feels like another wave of drama coming. I know, but I'm curious about what happened with the job. It doesn't align with anything she's said or done in the past week. Devon studied me for a moment, a small smile playing at his lips. You really care what happens to her, don't you? Despite everything. The observation caught me off guard. A week ago, I would have said Melanie was the last person I'd feel invested in. But seeing her vulnerability, her genuine desire for something of her own, it had humanized her in ways I hadn't expected. I think I just see her more clearly now, I said finally. Not as the perfect Caldwell daughter-in-law, but as someone who's been shaped and constrained by the same family pressures that affected you. just in different ways. Devon nodded slowly. The golden child and the black sheep, two sides of the same dysfunctional coin. Exactly. And now that she's questioning her role in that dynamic, I can't help but want to support that growth. Just be careful, Devon cautioned. Whatever's going on with Melanie and Ethan right now seems volatile. Don't get pulled too deeply into their drama. I promised to maintain appropriate boundaries, but as I prepared for bed that night, I couldn't help wondering what tomorrow's conversation would reveal. The Caldwell family dynamics were shifting rapidly, fault lines appearing in the carefully maintained surface. And somehow, I had become a focal point in that transformation, a role I had neither sought nor anticipated. As I drifted towards sleep, I realized that regardless of what Melanie shared tomorrow, I was no longer the outsider desperately seeking acceptance from the Caldwell family. Somehow, in the past week, I had stepped into my own power within that system, not as Devon's wife or the children's mother, but as Morgan Taylor, a woman whose worth wasn't determined by anyone else's assessment. It was a subtle but profound shift, one that would shape whatever came next in this evolving family drama. And for the first time since I'd met the Caldwells, I felt truly ready to face it on my own terms. The Starbucks in my building lobby was already bustling with the morning rush when I arrived at 7:25. I secured a table in the corner, positioning myself to watch the entrance while sipping my latte. Despite my outward calm, questions churned inside me. Why had Melanie suddenly declined a job she'd been so excited about? What had happened in the Caldwell household since our last communication? At precisely 7:30, Melanie pushed through the door. Her appearance startled me. Gone was the perfectly coiffed sister-in-law I'd known for years. This Melanie wore minimal makeup, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, dressed in jeans and a sweater rather than her usual designer attire. But it was the shadows under her eyes that truly caught my attention. Evidence of sleepless nights and hidden struggles. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I got your messages yesterday. I'm sorry I couldn't respond." I was concerned, I admitted, pushing a second latte toward her. I'd ordered her drink based on what she'd chosen during our previous coffee shop conversation. "Diana said you declined the PR position. What happened?" Melanie wrapped her hands around the cup, seeming to draw comfort from its warmth. "Ethan happened." She took a deep breath, visibly gathering herself. After Friday night's disaster at Richard and Eleanor's, things were actually improving between us. The counseling was helping. He seemed to be processing everything, coming to terms with the changes. I nodded, encouraging her to continue. Then yesterday morning, Richard called. Her expression hardened slightly. He told Ethan he'd put in a good word for me at Vertex, spoken to Marcus directly about my candidacy. He presented it as some grand paternal gesture. I see. The pieces were starting to fit together. Ethan was furious, not at Richard, but at me. Accused me of using family connections to get the job, of undermining the Caldwell name somehow. She laughed without humor. The irony is staggering. Ethan's entire career has been built on Richard's connections, but when I supposedly benefit from them, suddenly it's shameful. "But you didn't ask Richard to call," I pointed out. "And you had already earned the position on your own merits." "I know that. You know that." But in Ethan's mind, once Richard got involved, the entire thing became tainted. Melanie sipped her latte, her gaze distant. "He said I had to choose. My marriage or the job." I couldn't hide my shock. "He gave you an ultimatum?" Not in so many words, but the message was clear. Her voice dropped lower. "I've spent 7 years being the perfect Caldwell wife, Morgan. I don't know who I am outside of that identity. The thought of losing it, of starting over completely on my own, it terrified me." The vulnerability in her admission resonated deeply. Despite our differences, I understood the fear of having your entire identity wrapped up in how others perceive you. So, you declined the position, I said softly. Melanie nodded, then surprised me. But I've been thinking about it nonstop since. About what it means that I let Ethan make this decision. About what I'm teaching Liam and Sophia by backing down. Her gaze met mine directly, a new resolve visible beneath the exhaustion. That's why I wanted to meet. To ask, is it too late? Could I still accept the position if Thompson hasn't filled it yet? The question caught me off guard. I'd expected explanations, perhaps apologies, but not this direct request for help. Technically, yes. Diana hasn't moved to the second-choice candidate yet. I studied her carefully. But Melanie, what about Ethan? What about his ultimatum? Something shifted in her expression, a hardening, a determination I'd never seen before. I love my husband, Morgan, but I'm done letting the Caldwell men dictate my choices. If Ethan truly loves me, he'll support my career the way Devon has always supported yours. And if he doesn't... She swallowed hard. Then maybe our marriage isn't what I thought it was. The courage in her stance, this woman who had always played by the Caldwell rules now standing firmly in her own truth, was remarkable. But I still had concerns. What about Richard and Eleanor? How will they react? Melanie smiled thinly. That's the other reason I wanted to talk to you. Eleanor called me yesterday afternoon, after my conversation with Ethan, after I'd declined the position. She asked why I'd turned down such a perfect opportunity. This surprised me. What did you tell her? The truth, about Ethan's reaction, about feeling trapped between my marriage and my career aspirations. Melanie's eyes shone with unexpected tears. And do you know what she said? That I should reconsider. That a marriage built on ultimatums and control wasn't healthy. That she and Richard had made mistakes with both their sons, fostering competition instead of support, and she didn't want to see those patterns continue in the next generation. I sat back, absorbing this. After my lunch with Eleanor, I'd sensed genuine reflection. But this level of insight surpassed my expectations. That sounds like growth, I said finally. It was shocking, Melanie agreed. Eleanor has always been the one enforcing the Caldwell rules, maintaining appearances at all costs. To hear her encouraging me to prioritize my own fulfillment over Ethan's ego, I hardly recognized her. We sat in contemplative silence for a moment, both processing the rapid evolution in family dynamics. Finally, I leaned forward. If you want the PR position, I'll speak with Diana today. Explain that there was a misunderstanding, that you're still interested. Relief and gratitude washed over Melanie's face. Thank you, Morgan. I know I haven't earned your support, not after how I've treated you all these years. Everyone deserves a chance to redefine themselves, I said simply. I'm just returning the favor Eleanor extended to me yesterday. As we prepared to leave, Melanie hesitated. There's one more thing. Eleanor mentioned a family dinner to celebrate your Jiang contract. Will you and Devon be there? I nodded. We're considering it. She seemed genuinely interested in celebrating the achievement, not just using it for social currency. I'd like to be there too, Melanie said decisively, with or without Ethan, to show my support for you, publicly, in front of the family. Her words carried the weight of a declaration, a clear break from the united front the Caldwells had always presented. That would mean a lot to me, I acknowledged. But are you prepared for the potential fallout? Melanie straightened. Her shoulders, a glimpse of her old confidence returning but now directed toward a worthier purpose. I spent years helping maintain the Caldwell facade. It seems fitting that I help dismantle it too. With that, we parted ways. Melanie to confront whatever awaited her at home, me to navigate the professional implications of her renewed interest in the PR position. As I rode the elevator to my office, I marveled at how thoroughly my understanding of my sister-in-law had transformed in just 1 week. The perfect Melanie, who had once seemed so unreachable, so judgmental, was revealing herself to be a woman in transition, finding her voice, her boundaries, her true priorities. Diana was receptive to my explanation about Melanie's changed circumstances, agreeing to reconnect with her about the position. When I asked if Richard's inappropriate call had influenced Thompson's decision-making in any way, she shook her head firmly. Marcus made it very clear to Thompson that the selection needed to be based solely on qualifications. Richard's interference, if anything, created extra scrutiny of Melanie's candidacy, scrutiny she passed with flying colors. By lunchtime, the situation was resolved. Melanie had formally accepted the position and would start in 2 weeks as planned. I texted Devon the update, adding, "Something significant is shifting in your family. Melanie is standing up to Ethan. Eleanor is encouraging her. I'm still processing what it all means." His response came quickly. "Miracles do happen. Cautiously optimistic, but keeping expectations low. Love you." Devon's measured reaction reflected our shared experience with the Caldwells. Years of disappointment had taught us to protect ourselves from hoping too much, too quickly. But as the day progressed, I found myself genuinely looking forward to Eleanor's celebration dinner, curious to see how these evolving dynamics would play out in person. The dinner was scheduled for Saturday evening, a deliberate choice to accommodate the children's schedules, another small but significant indication of Eleanor's changing priorities. When we arrived at the lakefront home, the atmosphere was noticeably different from previous gatherings. Instead of the formal dining room with its intimidating table settings and rigid seating arrangements, Eleanor had set up dinner in the more casual garden room, with its wall of windows overlooking the water. "Grandma!" Zoe ran ahead as we entered, showing none of her usual hesitation around Eleanor. "I brought my new sketches to show you." Eleanor knelt to her level, another departure from past behavior, and received the sketchbook with genuine enthusiasm. "I can't wait to see them, sweetheart. And I've been thinking about our art museum trip. I found an exhibition of women painters I think you might enjoy." The simple exchange, the natural warmth between grandmother and granddaughter brought an unexpected lump to my throat. This was what I had always wanted for my children, grandparents who saw and celebrated them for exactly who they were. Richard appeared from his study, greeting Devon with a handshake that transformed into an awkward but sincere hug. "Son, good to see you." He turned to Tyler, who was partially hiding behind Devon's legs. "And there's my rocket scientist. Your grandmother tells me you've been building model rockets with your dad." Tyler emerged cautiously. "Yeah, we made one that went super high. I'd love to see that sometime," Richard said, his interest appearing genuine rather than perfunctory. "Perhaps we could launch one together during your visit to the Science Center next weekend." These small moments of connection continued throughout the evening. The conversation flowed naturally, touching on everyone's interests rather than revolving exclusively around Richard's work or Ethan's accomplishments. When the topic turned to the John contract, Eleanor raised her glass, in a toast that felt authentic rather than performative. "To Morgan," she said simply, "whose talent and dedication have brought such wonderful opportunities to her company. We're proud of you, dear." The words I had waited 3 years to hear, not just acknowledgement, but genuine pride in my accomplishments. Devon squeezed my hand under the table, his eyes reflecting my own mixture of emotion and cautious hope. Melanie arrived about an hour into the evening, alone, as she had warned she might be. The subtle shift in the atmosphere was immediate, Eleanor and Richard exchanging concerned glances as she entered. "Ethan sends his regrets," Melanie said smoothly, accepting a glass of wine from Richard. "He had a case preparation that couldn't wait." We all recognized the polite fiction, but no one challenged it. Another departure from the Caldwell pattern of demanding explanations, of insisting on maintaining appearances at all costs. as dinner concluded and the children moved to the living room to watch a movie, Eleanor proposed that the adults enjoy coffee on the terrace. In the soft evening light, with the lake stretching before us, the conversation turned inevitably to the changes unfolding within the family. "Richard and I have been doing a lot of thinking," Eleanor began, her voice uncharacteristically tentative, "about the patterns we've created over the years, the expectations we've placed on everyone, the ways we've prioritized certain relationships over others." Richard nodded, unaccustomed to this type of vulnerable conversation but making a visible effort. "We haven't been fair to either of our sons, though in different ways. We pushed Ethan toward a path that might not have been right for him, and we failed to value Devon's choices simply because they were different from our own. And we've been equally unfair to both of you," Eleanor added, looking between Melanie and me. Expecting Melanie to conform to an outdated idea of a proper wife while dismissing Morgan's incredible talents and achievements. The frank acknowledgement hung in the evening air, more powerful for its simplicity. Devon shifted in his chair, clearly processing his parents' words. "It's a start," he said finally. "But real change takes time, consistent effort. It's not just about saying the right things once." "We know," Richard said, surprising me with his humility. "We're asking for patience as we learn to do better, to be better." Melanie set down her coffee cup, her expression resolute. "I think we all need to be more honest with each other going forward. No more pretending everything's fine when it isn't. No more sacrificing authenticity for appearances." Her words seemed directed partially at herself, an acknowledgement of her own role in maintaining unhealthy family dynamics. Eleanor reached across the table to touch her hand gently. "How are things with Ethan?" she asked directly. Another break from the Caldwell tradition of avoiding uncomfortable truths. Melanie took a deep breath. "Difficult. He's struggling with all these changes, in the family, in our marriage, in his self-perception. The counseling is helping, but it's bringing up a lot of painful realizations about the pressure we put on him," Richard acknowledged quietly. "The impossible standards." "Yes," Melanie confirmed, "and about how those patterns have shaped his expectations in our marriage. He's trying, Richard, but his absence tonight is a setback," Eleanor finished for her, "but not the end of the story." As the conversation continued, weaving through difficult truths and cautious hopes, I found myself observing more than participating. This new openness, this willingness to examine long-established patterns, it felt both foreign and deeply refreshing. Whether it would last remained to be seen, but the simple fact that it was happening at all represented a seismic shift in the Caldwell family culture. Later, as Devon and I prepared to take our sleepy children home, Eleanor drew me aside for a private word. "Morgan," she began, her voice soft but clear, "I want you to know that regardless of what happens with Ethan and Melanie, regardless of how successfully Richard and I manage to change our ingrained habits, you will never again be the family embarrassment in this house. You are brilliant, accomplished, and a wonderful mother. We were blind not to see it sooner." The words, simple, direct, healing, washed over me like a balm. Not because I needed Eleanor's validation to know my worth, but because they represented a truth finally acknowledged, that the problem had never been me, but the narrow lens through which the Caldwells had chosen to view the world. "Thank you, Eleanor," I said simply. "That means a lot to me." As we drove home, Zoe and Tyler already asleep in the back seat, Devon reached for my hand across the console. "So," he said quietly, "what do you think? Is this change real?" I considered the question carefully, thinking of Eleanor kneeling, to look at Zoe's drawings, of Richard's genuine interest in Tyler's rockets, of the frank conversations about painful family patterns. "I think it's a beginning," I answered honestly. Whether it lasts depends on everyone's commitment to the process, including ours. But yes, I believe something genuine is happening. Devon nodded, his expression thoughtful. And Melanie? This new independence she's finding, do you think that will last? That's her journey to navigate, I said. But having spent time with her lately, seeing the real person beneath the perfect facade, I'm rooting for her. We fell into comfortable silence, the sleeping city passing by our windows. After a moment, Devon spoke again, his voice filled with quiet conviction. You know, it's ironic. All these years they saw you as the family embarrassment, when really you've been the catalyst for something important, something healing. The observation resonated deeply. In standing firmly in my truth, as a professional, as a mother, as a woman who refused to diminish herself to fit others' expectations, I had inadvertently created space for others to question long-held patterns. For Melanie to seek fulfillment beyond her role as a Caldwell wife. For Eleanor and Richard to reconsider their rigid definitions of success and family loyalty. Sometimes the person who doesn't fit the mold ends up reshaping it for everyone, I mused. Devon squeezed my hand, his smile visible in the dim light from the dashboard. Their loss all these years, but maybe not anymore. As we pulled into our driveway, our sleeping children in the back seat, our modest but beloved home waiting to receive us, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with winning the Caldwell's approval. My worth had never depended on their recognition, but there was something undeniably healing about finally being seen clearly, about family relationships evolving towards something more authentic and supportive. Whatever came next, whether Ethan eventually joined this family transformation, whether Richard and Eleanor's efforts at change proved lasting, whether Melanie found a balance between her marriage and her newfound independence, I would face it not as an outsider seeking acceptance, but as a woman secure in her own value, leading by example rather than seeking validation. The family embarrassment had become the family catalyst, and in that unexpected role, I had found not just acceptance, but something far more precious: the power to help transform a family culture for the next generation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.